So a couple words about myself. So as I mentioned before, je m'appelle Julie Côté. I have a PhD in biomechanics from Université de Montréal. I'm a full professor in biomechanics. My research focuses on the analysis of repetitive movements in a sport context. That would mean swimming, cycling, running, so performing biomechanical analyses of these activities. I have expertise in measuring muscle fatigue and on assessing sex differences. But before that, before I was a researcher, I was also a national team track and field athlete representing Canada at the World University Games. And I was also an NCAA champion while running for the University of Wisconsin Badgers. I'm also a certified middle distance coach. My role specifically as the director of SASSI is really to lead the development of SASSI, realize its vision, and that's going to be through the creation of as many research opportunities in sports science as possible for our researchers and our students. So enough about me. Let me introduce my colleagues, so the panel members. I'm just going to say a few words about each of them, and then after that, we'll start the round of questions. So let's start with Karolina Wisniewska. So Karolina, you can maybe wave. Very proud and happy to have Karolina on board on the SASSI project. So Karolina is a member of the SASSI International Advisory Board. But beyond that, Karolina is also the co-chef de mission of the 2024 Paralympic Games in Paris, as well as the 2023 Pan-Am Games in Santiago, Chile. So we can probably hear more about those experiences, Karolina. And otherwise, Karolina also competed in alpine skiing at the 98, 2002, and 2010 Paralympic Games, winning 8 medals in those events. And finally, Karolina is the first Paralympian to be inducted into the Canadian Ski Hall of Fame. And of course, she's also a member of the Canadian Paralympic Hall of Fame. So welcome, Karolina. We're extremely proud to have you on board for SASSI and on this panel.
Thank you.
All right. I also should mention that Karolina is a McGill alum with majors in political science and history. So the brains and the athleticism all accounted for. All right, next up we have Dr. Philippe Dixon. So Phil can maybe wave for us. So very happy to have Phil. So Phil is an assistant professor in biomechanics at McGill University, a new recruit as of January 2024. So we're very happy and fortunate to have Phil as a game changer in sports science research at McGill. So Phil is a very well accomplished alumnus of McGill, but also Harvard and Oxford universities. And Phil's research focuses on human movement biomechanics using motion capture, wearable devices, and artificial intelligence. And his research, which is very exciting and innovative, we'll hear more about it, focuses on running, hockey, and skiing, among other activities. So welcome, Phil, and thank you very much for being here. And finally, but none the least, we have Thalia Krauth-Ibarz. Thank you, Thalia. And who is Thalia? Thalia is a master's student and also a recipient of a SASSI student fellowship. So one of the actors and game changers as well as for SASSI on the student front. So Thalia's research focuses on nutrition and metabolism. And Thalia is also an accomplished athlete in both soccer and cycling. And she's also supportive of elite athlete training at the INSQ, the Institut National du Sport du Québec, as a strength and conditioning coach. So involved in all facets of sports science research. So thank you very much, Thalia, for being here. All right, so without further ado, and welcome to everybody who has been joining the chat. Very happy to see that. Let's just get warmed up. This is sports science. So with the first round of questions, so I'd like to ask the same question. Let's start with maybe Karolina first. And the question would be, just tell us about your journey. I think the audience is interested to hear what brought you to this place now. So tell us a bit about your journey to date. What has led you to be involved in sports science and performance?
It's a great question. I think anyone who's familiar with high performance sport in Canada or internationally would be familiar with the impact and the importance of sports science. So certainly as a three-time Paralympian representing Canada, sports science played a huge role in my success as an athlete. And I think, it's probably come a long way since I've retired. So I think that's why a place like SASSI is so important. And so then when I found out about SASSI and the board of directors, I was really excited to come on board, especially being an alumna of McGill. So I'm very excited to see what SASSI can do, and some of the projects and research that have already been ongoing. But I think it's also exciting to think about what the future might hold.
Excellent. Yeah, we're definitely going to leave enough time to talk about the future today. Moving on to Phil, it would be great to hear from you, Dr. Dixon, about your journey to date. What has led you to this point and to be interested in sports science?
Sure, for me, so I'll take it back. Well, before that, just thank you, Julie, for the introduction and for inviting me on this panel. So for me, the journey started really when I was choosing my graduate studies. So, I grew up with a passion for sport. I certainly didn't make it to the levels of my esteemed colleagues here on the panel, but I excelled more, in the classroom with all things physics, mathematics, computer programming. But I didn't have a passion for that on its own. And so after my undergraduate studies, actually, I didn't know anything about kinesiology, and then found out that, that field could use my skills, more my programming skills, my technical skills, and I could kind of combine that with my passion for sport, and kind of find my way. So the journey really started, as you mentioned, Julie. So I completed my master's degree here at McGill University in this very department, and that's really when I discovered all things sports science. So I was part of the McGill Ice Hockey Research Group at the time, and kind of an interesting turn of events. I happen to now co-direct that group with Dr. Sean Robbins at the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy. And that was really my initiation to sports science. And so, I can talk a little bit about that later, but throughout my studies, and I've come full circle. I'm back here at McGill, and I'm really excited to be part of the SASSI community as well.
That's great. Thank you very much, Phil. And we were ecstatic to be able to recruit Phil. And if people don't mind, what you talked about reminded me also of an aha moment of mine where in physics in Cégep, I was mentioning that to Thalia, I think, one of my Cégep professors gave us an opportunity to do a project on matching a sport interest with physics. And to me, that was the biggest aha moment. So any instructors, teachers out there, you can really create aha moments for students and future researchers. So great, thank you. And over to Thalia. So what brought you here, Thalia? Tell us about a bit about your journey to date.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the introduction as well, and for the invitation to this panel. So what brought me here? So I as you said earlier, I've been playing sports my whole life. So I played soccer for almost 20 years with McGill, but also at like a semi-pro level. And then I've also done a lot of track and field in the past. So got a bit to touch individual sports, but also team sports. So my passion for sports and everything related to exercise kind of started from there. So then when I eventually wanted to go do my university studies, I chose McGill. I'm also from Montreal, so it was a easy choice for me for that at the beginning. So did my undergraduate studies, and I always knew that I wanted to pursue a master's degree or continue my education, have some type of research experience, and have a bit of contribution as well from my part in sports science. So yeah, after my undergrad at McGill, I started working as a strength and conditioning coach at ENS Quebec. And then that's where I was really able to see the influence that sports science has like on the field, and how coaches use it, how it affects athletes as well. So I already had that idea of wanting to pursue a master's, and then I was lucky enough to have supportive supervisors at INS that also encouraged me to pursue a master's. So I had a couple of options. I wanted for sure to stay somewhere in Quebec, but I chose to go at McGill because a couple of reasons. I was still playing soccer at that point, so I had a good connection with the Martlet soccer team. I wanted to continue with that, but also as well the opportunity that the Sylvan Adams Sports Science Institute could give students, so new students and their projects. So have funding for that is a huge part of that, and I think it's one of the only universities in Quebec, if I'm not mistaken, that can offer, let's say, master's students an opportunity to do sports science and have that amount of funding. So that's what kind of got me here.
That's excellent. Thank you, Thalia. And we're very proud to be able to support the cream of the crop. We have such excellent students at McGill University. So I can speak from experience that more and more over the last 10 years, students are really interested in opportunities that marry the academics and experiences on the field, experiences that can make a difference to practice, be it practice in any field, but to athletes and in sports science. So and also opportunities for multidisciplinary research. I think this is something that we can be proud of, that we can provide. Excellent. All right, so we covered the past. Let's talk about the present. So I'm interested to find out from all three of you, what are you focusing on now? What are you spending your time working on now to advance sports science, ideally, as much as possible, but any of your main responsibilities and commitments that are relevant to sports science? So Karolina, I know there are the Paralympic Games coming up, but anything else that you can think of? And we'll start with Karolina again. So what are you working on these days that could be relevant to sports science? And feel free to mention what you might need in terms of support as well.
Great. I guess I'm in the hot seat. I get to go first every time. Before I answer that question, I did want to just go back to the comment about physics. And I have to say, and this is really related to sports science, and Phil, I heard you have some connection with a ski company or the making of skis. There's a lot of physics that goes into alpine skiing. And I was never great at physics, I have to confess. I'm a Bachelor of Arts student from McGill, but there is so much physics involved in alpine skiing, and the ability to be able to use that part of my brain as I watched other people ski or videos of myself, it all really comes together. And in a similar way, I would say sports science also comes together when you're training and trying to pull all the pieces together. It's not simply about a physical output or even a mental output, which I think most people are familiar with. It is all these elements coming together, your equipment, the physics of your body moving through space. It's fascinating. So in terms of what I'm doing now, as Dr. Côté mentioned, I am one of 2 chefs de mission for the Canadian team at the upcoming Paralympic Games in Paris. So I'm thrilled to have been chosen for that position, particularly because I'm a winter athlete and I was chosen to be a chef for Summer Games, which I think is a bit of a coup, but it's great, it's fantastic. And we've been working really hard with the Canadian Paralympic Committee, with the coaches, the athletes, and also what we call their ISTs, which are their integrated service teams. And that would include their massage therapists, their sports psychiatrists, and all the people who, of course, are involved in sports science. So it's really, as a chef de mission, it's really about supporting the whole of Team Canada and making sure that all of those elements are well in place for the athletes and the people who support them. And so again, I would say that the critical thing for me as a member of the advisory board at SASSI is to see and to understand just how much of an impact sports science has, I would say, not only on training, on a daily training environment, but really, of course, on that performance at the top, that elite performance. Not everyone out there who's a weekend warrior needs sports science. Humanity needs an understanding of sports science, and that notion of from the muscle cell to the podium is very interesting, because I think that understanding of kinesiology, biology, and movement through space is fascinating and important for humanity. But from a high performance sport perspective, it's very, I would say it's very focused. So to me, being involved in the SASSI community, it's fascinating to see how the implications of sports science are much broader than one might think.
Excellent point. And we're very fortunate to have you and your unique perspective, or very useful and important perspective that you bring to SASSI. And it is pretty remarkable that, you know, being a winter athlete, you were chosen for the Côté d'émission. So even more congratulations to you on that. Great. So thank you. Phil, any thoughts on this? But also, what are you working on these days? What are the exciting things that you can actually share, recognizing that some things can still need to be maintained private, but what can you share with us that you're working on that's exciting?
Of course. So, I mean, since I started at McGill in January, I've been focusing on two main things. I mean, there's a teaching aspect of my job as well as the research. You know, in terms of teaching, I can say a few words. I'm teaching one of the undergraduate courses in biomechanics, and you know, through that, trying to impart on the students that the importance of, or the growing need for technology with all things to measure, you know, biomechanics of movement and sport. But if we focus a little bit more on the research side of things, so mainly I've been looking at two activities, mostly running biomechanics and ice hockey research as well. So in terms of running, the main thing that I can share, I've been conducting a number of studies where really what we're trying to do is we're aiming to develop AI algorithms that can predict the environment in which a person is running. So right now you can get a step counter from your smartwatch, and then get some type of idea about your training load, how many kilometers did you run. But we find that the information isn't granular enough, and we think it'd be really exciting if we could tell the athlete, well, you know, maybe you ran 100 kilometers last week, but you know, 20 kilometers of that was on a trail, 10 kilometers was on a rubberized track, and the rest was, you know, in an urban environment. And then we can kind of gauge, the coaches can gauge if they need to make changes to that. So I've had a few studies conducted with that, and you know, we have some algorithms that I think are pretty much ready to be deployed. In terms of ice hockey, what I can share, we've just recently submitted a paper where we're looking at activity classification for ice hockey. So kind of in layman terms, what we're looking at is, you know, can we develop a machine learning algorithm that can automatically find out in real time what is the person doing while they're playing a hockey game. So then, you know, we could review a hockey game and have again, segregated by shot type or, you know, skating type, what each person on the team was doing, and then feed that information back to the coaches, not only to kind of maybe vary the type of shots or change the strategy, but also in terms of movement quality. So in the younger or non-elite groups, kind of how can they develop their shot types a little bit better based on this type of technology. So these are the main two aspects that I think I can share today. I can't speak too much about the alpine ski at this point, but maybe in a next panel.
Oh, so we have another panel coming up. I think we'll have to redo this. Just if the panelists don't mind, when I hear something that resonates with me, what you said, Phil, about data analytics and getting data ready to be used by coaches, I can also say that I'm involved in a project on para swimming, and my student Matt Slopecki is developing algorithms that are based on one wearable sensor. And I believe that it's going to be possible to use data collected during competition now, which is really exciting, and to feed it immediately to the coaches, and just to really collaborate with the coaches, because I think we all agree there's a multitude of data available, but what is the best, most optimal use of it that we can make for coaches and athletes? So exciting. Switching things off a little bit, Thalia, can you tell us a little bit about what you're researching, what you're doing these days in research and anything else as well, maybe your athletic priorities as well these days?
For sure. I also have a question for Karolina to start. I was wondering what the role of a chef de mission is. Like, what exactly do you do?
It's a really good question, and it's one that I get asked a lot.
Okay.
It's essentially, if you speak French, it makes it a lot easier. Chef de mission, it helps you understand. But it's, if you think of like every time Canada or any country sends a team to an Olympic or Paralympic Games, they have a chef de mission, and that person is really, like, I would say in English, like the head of the delegation. So it's like in foreign affairs, where you have a head of delegation or the ambassador, if you will. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm the ambassador of Canada, but in some sense there is that kind of, it is partly that kind of a role, but it's really three-pronged. It's one, as I mentioned, supporting the athletes and the staff. Second is dealing with partners, sponsors, that sort of thing. And third is to be the spokesperson, so dealing with media and that sort of thing. But it's great fun. It's very varied. And I'm really happy that for the last number of years, both the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee have chosen their chefs solely from former athletes. I think that's very important because we
for
have
sure.
kind of a figurehead and mentors. So it's great. Great question.
Cool. Yeah, you must be quite busy having to do all that, especially since the games are coming up soon.
Thalia, you're still on. What are you doing?
Yeah, so what am I doing? Okay, so for, let's say, research side of things, I'm working, my supervisor is Dr. Churchward Vinay. He's running a lab looking at nutrition and metabolism. And my project that I'm going to do with him is also affiliated with INS. And it's going to be looking at how to optimize recovery in athletes, and more specifically looking at cold water immersion, and looking at how, let's say, ice baths, cold water can help for recovery and optimal timing. That's the idea of the project, basically, and that's where my involvement with McGill is. But otherwise, what I'm doing for my sports side, let's say, I actually had an opportunity, maybe it'll be a year soon, it was in May, to change sports. So as I said earlier, I had been playing soccer my whole life, so almost 20 years for me, and had an opportunity to try a new sport through the RBC training ground. So I was able to try track cycling, and I told myself I should try a new opportunity, see how far I can get in this new sport. So I put my passion for soccer aside and started cycling. And as I said earlier, track cycling more specifically. And what I find pretty cool about the Science Institute here is that it's also a link with Sylvan Adams. So where I'm training is out of Bromont. And the track that's there is also one that was kindly funded by Sylvan Adams. So it's cool to see also that I'm practicing the same sport that he does, and I had seen him a couple of times at the track. But yeah, so at the moment, that's what I'm doing, practicing that sport, trying to see how far I can get. But I'm all in for now. Otherwise, last little point is, as a strength and conditioning coach now, I'm working with a couple of different teams at INS, but I'm mainly focused with the para hockey team, so the provincial para hockey team, and I'm leading their strength and conditioning side of things.
Very interesting. I did not know that. Learning a lot too.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you very much, Thalia, and we'll be keeping an eye on your research. I think you very modestly are not giving too much details, but it's pretty prestigious that you are one of our young researchers that we're investing in. So looking forward to working with you.
Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, we can switch the order, Karolina. Let's start with maybe Phil for the next question, and I'd like to look now towards the future. And we're trying to develop a research institute. We are trying to be innovative, trying to really push the limits of performance. What do you foresee, Phil, are the means or the keys to innovation? What are we going to need to be able to further push the envelope in sports science in your area or generally?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. So I'll start this round, no problem. I think for me, one of the keys or one of the important things that we need to consider, especially in research, is looking at collaborating across different disciplines. So, of course, as a researcher, I'm collaborating with other professors in kinesiology, but I'm thinking a little bit further as well. So we mentioned how can we bring these ideas to coaches so that they can directly impact performance, but this also extends to engineering, materials science, and I think that's one thing that's really exciting in the future. So, like, just to bring back the example of this, this application that I've developed where I can automatically detect what kind of conditions a person is running on. Well, if there's shoe manufacturers out there or material engineers that can then use this and say, can we in real time, change the properties of the material? And could those changes in material be protective against injury? I think that everyone would be excited about. Could it improve performance? At that point, we have to start thinking about, if it's going too far or not in terms of an edge for in competition. But looking, I think materials will be a big deal. We can come back, I think, as well later if we want. But I think there's also, just in terms of the actual wearable devices that the athletes are using, we're really in the infancy of that technology. Looking at, we need new wearables that will be able to extract more complex parameters about physiology that might be relevant. So I know that in the pipeline, I've been reading about wearables that are able to in real time track your lactate threshold, for example, or better use of continuous glucose monitors, blood pressure monitoring, just things that are a little bit more advanced than looking at your heart rate and looking at the number of steps that you've done. So those are simple examples that I gave, but I think there's going to be more and more parameters that we never thought that we could actually estimate or measure non-invasively with wearable devices that are going to become really game changers in the coming years.
Thank you, Phil. And of course, all of this is going to require investment towards testing the sensitivity of these devices, developing new, smaller sensors that are more sensitive. So I just want to mention too that SASSI, we're hopeful and we have an aspiration that there's going to be a development and innovation hub within the SASSI space. And the idea is to bring experts from different sectors. Like you mentioned, multidisciplinarity is key, I think, to push the envelope. So, when you cross the boundaries between physiology, psychology, biomechanics in the same space with athletes and with researchers in a space that has the tools to work on this product development, I think this is where the richness of the innovation will come in. So that's definitely in line with what we want to do with SASSI. Okay, ladies, who's next up to tackle that same question? Karolina, go for it.
I'm ready now. I have so many ideas. Well, first of all, okay, I'm speaking from a point of bias, but hear me out. I think, well, first of all the things that Phil was saying are fascinating to me. I'm nodding, I'm smiling. I'm like, oh, I wish these things existed when I was an athlete. So I think absolutely on the right track for sure. And it's also interesting to note, I think there's a big challenge to be had. Julie, you mentioned the sports you participated in and that you work on as a scientist, and Phil as well. Of course, there's a challenge in sports where the athlete is in the outdoors in a non-measurable space, of like non-measurable in the sense that it's not always 100 meters, those sorts of things. So there are all these other variables that come into play, which I think make it fascinating and interesting and challenging, but also obviously more difficult then to extract the data that one would need to make it kind of applicable across the board. And that brings me to one of the things I always think about, which is parasport, if you will. So not just Paralympians, but, you know, people with a disability participating in sport, and how can some of this be extracted and used in that area. And first of all, I have to say, I'm so thrilled to hear two of the four people here, well, three of the four people are somehow involved in parasport. Julie with para swimming, and Thalia coaching para ice hockey. And I will say, I'm sure, Thalia, you've seen, or I'm guessing you've seen, that a whole big group of paracyclists also train at Beaumont. And as a joke, as chef de mission, I was going to go try all the different sports, and like track cycling is top of my list. I was like, I totally want to do this because it's steep and it's scary and it just looks great. I don't know if I'll get a chance to, but let
me know when you're there.
Okay, because I really do try, but it would be like a blooper reel, because I would probably just fall over. However, I think what's interesting in the para world, of course, is that you have people, as you do in the able-bodied world, you have people with different bodies, different physiques, you know, different, maybe a lack of limb or an acquired disability versus one at birth. So for me, for example, I was born with cerebral palsy, which is my disability. And so how does that then play into the data that you can get on XYZ individual? And do you even have comparables within Canada, let alone internationally? And that's a really, really big question, but I think it's an exciting one to think about. And another one for me, and Dr. Côté, you've touched on this as well, is data on female athletes. I think for many, many decades in medicine, and perhaps also in sports science, there was a real focus on the male. And it's not to say we can't focus there as well, but the data about women athletes would be entirely different. It is a different cohort, again, with a different body type, with different cycles and all the rest of it. So I think there are so many potential areas, and I've probably named a whole bunch that are perhaps not relevant today for SASSI, but maybe 10, 20, 30 years down the road, who knows? I don't, you know, I'm not in the lab, and I'm not leading the thinking behind the research at SASSI, but I think there are so many directions that SASSI could go. And I just have to applaud Phil on the work he's doing, that he's been able to share with us, because as someone in the milieu I had a very long career, I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm like, oh, that's really bang on. It's cutting edge. So well done.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I just want to echo, definitely, yes, sex and gender differences in sport and health in general are, you know, it's something that I focus a lot of my research on, and I think it's very important, as well as personalized training and research. So, you know, you have those two kind of perspectives, but, and, you know, I think for a long time as researchers, we were very unoptimistic on our ability to perform good, strong, personalized data analysis. But now I think we're getting close, and I think SASSI can be a catalyzer for that. So yeah, I'm just going to say that for now and pass it on to Thalia. So what's the future from, you know, maybe your crystal ball as an athlete? You know, what do you think we need to develop, to invest in, to improve performance, to improve students' performance as well? So anything that you can think of for people who can listen and maybe help.
Yeah, this is a tough question, especially to follow up on you guys. I think that I'm at a maybe interesting time of my life, because I have the athlete perspective, the coach perspective, and as well the more like sports science perspective. So I trying to piece it all together, and I think I'm more sensitive sometimes to certain topics. So let's say ways that I'm being coached that I can also coach others, or some data that maybe sometimes the researchers might think that it's useful, but then you see the coach perspective and you don't see that link. So I don't know, I'm trying to piece it all together, and I think that's what the next couple of years are gonna help me develop if I keep on tackling these 3 challenges. But with that, keeping that in mind and trying to answer your question, I think you both said it quite well, where it's I have 2 thoughts. The first is there's a lot of data at the moment, and it's like, well, how do we use it, and how do we make it pertinent for the athletes, and how do we make it pertinent for the coaches? At the end of the day, it's a lot about in sports, it's a lot about performance. So how can you have an impact and ideally in a short amount of time? But yeah, so making the data sometimes say more visual for certain coaches or athletes, and what exactly do you extract with all these numbers? So looking, let's say, maybe at that, and then also individuality, and that's whether it's for para sports or for female athletes or male athletes or anything. I think that individuality is a big component of the future. If I'm not mistaken, before coaching was a lot about everyone kind of has to do the same thing, and if you don't fit in that boat, then you don't belong, or you can't continue, or you can't get to that higher level. But I think that as it develops, it's a lot about more individuality, and I think that's what can get us further and eventually get us more medals and higher performances.
I have to say something to that, Thalia. You are so right about the individualization, and I really like that concept. Instead of focusing on whether it's gender or disability or lack of disability, but in terms of the coaching and in terms of getting success by doing things in an individualized way, it's been shown in certain sports, the people who are, I'm going to name someone who's totally out of date, so I apologize. But like the Jordans of basketball or the Michael Phelps of swimming, you don't have to be named Michael, by the way. But anyway, those individuals, for sure, there's no way they followed the exact program that was set out for everybody. They went outside the lines and they did things their own way at various points in their career, and not just at the end when they were, incredible examples of athletes. I think that's something that they had. So that's really wonderful to also note that as an athlete, you could come and you could be seeking out your own personal advantage. I think it's important to note. And finally, I would like to say that I have not met Thalia in person, but I have to say that it's remarkable to have a student doing a master's degree at McGill who's also a coach and who's also an athlete and who has just transitioned to a new sport. That's it is really remarkable. So perhaps you don't realize how remarkable it is, but anyway, I just had to say that.
Thank you. Same goes to you as a high level athlete.
I was just going to say that, Karolina, you went through a similar era in combining studies and competition. So only accomplished ladies here. So and of course, Phil, not to leave you aside, Phil, of course, our innovator, innovator extraordinaire. Yeah.
I did want to jump in though, some of the things that Karolina and Thalia were saying. So, I mean, I was thinking back to my master's days. So, I mean, I had enough trouble just worrying about my grades and trying to keep up with just intramural sports was enough for me at that point. But one of the things that this reminded me of, this discussion in terms of the future and personalized medicine, personalized AI. So we do have the advantage in terms of, I guess in terms of AI models, is that actually they really work best when they are personalized, right? Like the general models will not work. And like, so in the SASSI context or in the elite sport context, we're always doing, personal athlete specific models. And those will the ones that will work best. So we work with athletes and coaches, and we use the athletes' training data to them help predict what we're looking for. The other thing I want to talk about also in terms of future directions or things that are exciting, in terms of how we deliver kind of this information in a coaching context. So we're definitely not trying to replace the coach. And a lot of the work that we've done, we've worked to develop kind of what we call decision support systems. So the coach will have their dashboard of indicators of how they're going to change the programming for a specific athlete. And we just want to be an extra line on that dashboard and say, the model has, tells that there's a 80% chance that this athlete will be injured. So they just keep that information in mind, and then, they go through the rest of the information they have, and they make their own judgment call on what to do, right? So we're not stepping in for that. We're just providing an extra data point that might be pertinent.
Yeah, that's a great point, Phil. Thank you for that. And I think it also brings up the importance of this being a mutually beneficial link or collaboration. And also sometimes it's going to come, the initiation of a project will come from a coach or from an athlete, where everybody wins by just sharing the information, the needs, and then also that helps with the responsiveness of the research that is being done. So yeah, excellent. And again, I just bring it back to SASSI, as I'm really hopeful that we can actually create an infrastructure that has a space, but also has meetings, groups, initiatives, strategic funding opportunities that are in line with those priorities. So thank you for that, everybody. Looking at the time, there's 15 minutes left. At this point, we would normally ask if there are any questions or comments from the audience, but for that, I would turn to Ariel, who's moderating the chats and the questions. So are there any questions or comments that we could address?
Currently, there are no questions or comments.
Okay, let's open it up, the pipeline for questions and comments. What else can I talk about? So Canada, what can we do? What are some, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3 key nuggets of investments that you think are key, could be game changers to improve performance as a whole for the athletes? Could be from the private sector, but if we're looking for investments or points of focus, specific initiatives, what do you think would be key for you? I can say that I can open it up to say we definitely need support in terms of infrastructure, research equipment, and just making our spaces accessible. And just helping us create an environment where we will be pushing the research. Even if we want to develop wearable technology, we want to be developing capacity to do some research outside of the lab. The lab research as well, from a validation perspective, has importance. So that's an important part for me, as my SASSI Director hat is a priority for us. But yeah, what can we do to just kind of convince people that science is important to sports and to performance in general?
And Judy, was that a question for all of us?
Everybody, yeah.
I don't know if Karolina, if you want to jump in, but
go for it, Phil. Go for it.
I was just going to say a few words, though, in terms of this innovation hub at SASSI. I think it's important that brings different members of the community in terms of the research community and sport community, but we need also a common thread between that innovation hub and the sports associations writ large across Canada if we want to have developments that'll make that will become game changers, right? So it's important and it's great that we focus on specific sports, but the knowledge that we're gaining can sometimes translate across different sports, across the nation. So we need to be open to all those potential collaborations.
And now I have something to add, which is, Phil, you're quite right. I think it's very exciting, but then as Judy mentioned, it's that ability to take the research outside of the lab. And so indeed, is it collaborating with INS, which is Institut National du Sport, where Thalia is working, or where I've trained, or is it to make closer connections with all the national sport organizations, the various different sports, the ones that SASSI focuses on? But Phil is right again. A lot of those sports are, I would say, like, you know, the cycling, the swimming, the running, those are all also used. I mean, I may have been an alpine skier, but I did all those sports in my dryland training, and those also give indicator, you know, all of that stuff will give indicators to my coaches. And so now what's exciting in this discussion for me is to hear about how to get that data, extract the data, and as Thalia pointed out, make it palatable, whether it's visual, or make it understandable and palatable to coaches, and potentially even to an even broader audience. And to then say, McGill, SASSI, our labs, our researchers, all of our entire community, our interdisciplinary community has contributed this for these athletes, would be so wonderful at some point to be able to see the kind of line, contributions to athletes, contributions to research, contributions to science, biomechanics, engineering, what have you. I think that's really interesting, but it is true. And I do think I mentioned this in my first SASSI board meeting, was that link with the sport community as well. So good one, Phil.
Yeah, I'm all of a sudden I'm getting a bunch of questions on the chat. So a couple that are coming back onto that important point of, okay, great, elite performance, how does that benefit the general population? Or, you know, if I'm just a recreational runner, but I'm still interested to find out more about my running style or whatnot, how can we help that? I would say personally that, you know, elite athletes are innovators. They're going to look for an edge. And a lot of the times, if you match research with an elite athlete, you're going to get a better understanding of what are these kind of game changer parameters, and then they can be expanded and they can be applied and made usable for anybody, for the general population. Phil, what do you think about that? How can we use the sports science research to benefit maybe sub-elite or everyday athletes?
Sure, no, of course, and I definitely agree with what Julie mentioned. So yeah, the research is applicable across levels, and I would even mention, you know, I have a lot of, you know, we're talking about sports science mainly here today, of course, but I have a whole arm of my research that is more clinical research and you know, looking at population with musculoskeletal disabilities, and so you know, what we learn from one definitely translate over to the other and vice versa, right? So it's the full spectrum that we're interested in researching, and there's, you know, there's benefits to be gained looking at all these different populations.
Yeah, you just made me think about something, Phil. I'm also involved in occupational health in ergonomics, and my way to teach ergonomics to students is think of the workers as athletes. Their bodies are you know, they're professional athletes in that way. They need their body to be healthy to earn a living. So there are a lot of concepts that cross over in terms of optimization of movement from the workplace perspective to the elite performance perspective. So I think we can learn a lot across the whole spectrum of performance by addressing elite performance, but not only that, obviously. All right. Any other comments on this? I'm looking at questions in the chat, but until then, in the process. Okay. What other partnerships are you open to? Businesses, other universities, etc. Anybody has a thought on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of research, I mean, there's no limits, right? I mean, I have a lot of partnerships with industry, other universities. It's really just a matter of research interest rather than specific context. So
Yeah.
I'm open to all kinds of different collaborations.
Yeah. Nobody's asked it, but I've been asked before. Sports teams and what kind of sports are we interested to research? Phil is involved in hockey research. Thalia, soccer, just bring it on. We'll do our best with soccer research to help improve performance. I think as Karolina was saying, there's a lot that can be learned from one sport to the other. So definitely we don't see restriction in terms of the sport activities or just the physical activities in general that we'd like to research. What
Judy,
else?
what about,
Yeah.
did you want to mention those SASSI's partnerships and collaborations? Like I'm thinking of Tel Aviv and so on.
Yeah, sure. This is also another kind of objective of SASSI is to develop cross-university collaborations. Initially, this was our first partner for those collaborations was Tel Aviv University, where they have similar infrastructures in terms of the research equipment. But it's actually exciting for me to see that there are more sports science institute or centers that are being kind of built across Canada even. And the idea is to find the ways where we can actually collaborate and not compete. I think there's enough need for us to find a way to complement each other and to help each other's innovations. Yeah, so for sure. There's a question here, when is the Innovation Hub supposed to be ready or expected to be ready? The building that's going to be dedicated to SASSI 2025, so summer 2025. As part of it, where we intend to create that kind of innovation hub with 3D printers, with equipment and facilities to create new technology and test new technology. So any product development, we'd love to be able to do that within the new building. So 2025, fingers crossed, summer, maybe second quarter, third quarter, we'll see, sometime in 2025. Any other comments or questions? We have 5 minutes to the panel. I've heard one question before. Well, Julie, sports science, it's all, it's mainly motivation. It's mostly the mental, that's going to make or break a performance. I guess, of course, there's multiple facets to performance, but I would argue that technology, in my event, even in track and field, now there are those carbon shoes. All kinds of world records are being broken every weekend in track and field. And we thought about 10 years ago that we had reached some kind of plateau. No. So I definitely think that there is a future for innovation in sports science, again, to improve performance, but also to benefit everybody, the whole spectrum of athletes.
Yeah, if I jump on that, I think
Yeah.
I'm just quickly thinking probably most of the most recent records that have been broken are probably due to innovations in sports science, whether that's like technology or new information about physiology and how to coach the athletes. But yeah, my quick thought is that a lot of the new records that are being broken are probably because of new innovations in sports science that we didn't have before.
And nutrition too, Thalia? There's all kinds of
Yeah.
new things we're learning about nutrition. So yeah.
For sure. Learning how the body works is definitely gonna help athletes do better and coaches coach better.
Yeah, and coaches too, that's an important point because the idea too is to understand what makes a good coach. Of course, equip the coaches with what they want and what they need in all respect of the coach and what they bring and what their interests are and what their personal styles are. So I think there's a lot that we can do for coaches there as well.
And I was just going to add, like, we can't think of these things as different silos, right? So sure it is mental, it's nutrition, it's biomechanics, it's everything, but all of these different disciplines have to work together. And then that's where we're going to reach our performance gains, right? So we can't neglect any aspect. And I mean, in terms of sports psychology, I mean, I mean, there is sports science or there's AI in there. I mean, it's not my field of expertise, but I mean, there's a role for modeling in terms of getting the athlete ready for performance as well. So all those aspects are super important.
Yeah, that's a great point, Phil. And I have a dream, a vision of SASSI catalyzing the McGill strengths as well. I mean, at McGill, we have strengths in engineering, in brain science, in artificial intelligence, in psychology of nutrition, psychology of in education, of course. We're in the Faculty of Education. So for me, I think that we have so many strengths that we can bring together and catalyze and just really make SASSI the hub where people can actually exchange this information from the different sectors. But I really think that McGill is well placed to draw from its strength and orient these strengths towards performance research and sports research. There's 1 minute left, guys. Time flies when we're having fun. Any final words from anybody?
Well, I was going to say something along the same lines as what you just said, Julie, but I think you can't say it any better than that. I think McGill has all of these strengths across disciplines, and you can either look at it from the perspective of SASSI and what we're trying to bring together, or from the perspective that Phil just gave us of all these impacts, all these inputs rather, impacting on an athlete. So if SASSI is the athlete, SASSI is trying to get all the best stuff, all the best nutrition, all the best data, all the best whatever, to be that hub and to be that wonderfully performing athlete. And then to the question of, it's not just that athlete and it's not just SASSI. We've really spoken about, I think, the broader impacts of all of this work and research for a broader community. And I think that interdisciplinarity is I think the key, if I could say that.
Definitely one of them. Yeah, I agree with that. And Thalia, you motivated to keep going in that same direction and help the world, help us advance SASSI.
Yeah, do it. I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
That's all we can hope for, but I'm very confident. All right, it's 5 o'clock, people. We did get a few questions. I hope we addressed them. If we missed your questions or comments, please visit the website www.mcgill.ca/SASSI or /SASSI, SASSI. Feel free to email us, reach out to us, and thanks for your attention, and thanks in advance for your support. All of this is only possible with everybody's support. But I want to thank the panelists, and I want to thank everybody who listened to us, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good